I think there is still quite a few people just chasing numbers in the weight room and feeling like they're doing, they're doing the job. And I think it's just way more than that.
Welcome to the Upside Strength Podcast, your number one fitness and performance resource in Switzerland. On today's episode, I'm happy to welcome Sam Boehringer. Sam is a sport performance coach working in Zug, Switzerland. He has a master's degree in high performance sport from ACU in Australia and has done multiple internships in the United States. He's also the off-ice strength and conditioning coach for the Swiss national ice hockey team since 2017. Sam, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Sean. Pleasure being on.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Always been a very active kid, started playing multiple sports, ended up playing lots of basketball, made it to the national level, always loved training, competing, and I was really interested in a lot of things. And when it came to my studies, I didn't really know what to do. And I ended up, following my passion with sports. And I did a year at the ETH in Zurich, studying human movement sciences, which I hated at the time, which was way too technical. Then switched to Basel, where I completed my bachelor's in exercise and health sciences. Loved the content, but still didn't really know what to do. Got into training, myself when I was 16, playing basketball, and just, did a lot of reading and trial and error with myself, but didn't really know that, the profession was out there for me, or that was possible. After my bachelor's, I was fortunate to do an exchange semester at the Chapman University, in California, in the US, which was for athletic training. And it was in athletic training in the traditional North American sense, so more so applied, sports physiotherapy. And luckily I got more into the performance side of things. I had a class which was Introduction to Performance Training for Athletes, and I kind of knew strength and conditioning from my exchange year in the US, which I did during high school. And I loved it back then, and also during the exchange semester. And one of my professors, he became like my first mentor at that time a bit, and he hooked me up with a job, and I started, training high school level ice hockey players.
That was in the US?
That was in the US, yeah. It was in the US. Didn't have a work permit, which wasn't a problem. I just, it was all on the hand, but I freaking loved it. And coming back after half a year, I knew I wanted to work with athletes at, in some sense. And I completed an internship up in Macklingen for, performance testing. And was lucky enough to land another internship at Elite Training in Zurich, which was at the time, the first and only sports performance training, private training center for elite athletes. They had quite a few alpine skiers and snowboarders, and started working with elite level ice hockey players. They took up the training for the ZSA Lions in season, and I was the first intern. And pretty much, never left the field. I loved it right away, and then ended up starting training some athletes in Bern on myself, because they didn't have the opportunity to give me a job. And beginning 2016, they offered me a full-time job in Zurich, and I took it up and worked there for 3 years. Started doing my master's in Australia, which I learned from one of my main mentors, Alex Brooker, who was my co-worker at the time. And pretty much worked my ass off during that time. We got in touch with the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation. Got lucky enough to do some camps for their underage national teams, and then got called up for the under 20, and from there to the men's national team. And never really left the field, and really found my passion in that. I quit working in Zurich due to personal reasons, and started working in Bern at the gym, at Unique Training, and leading the athletic department, and just taking care of all athletic training endeavors, whether it's teams or individuals, and so on and so forth. Completed my master's with some internships in the US, one with Altis and one with Cal Dietz at the University of Minnesota, which was really interesting. And worked last year in Bern full time, and now I looked for new challenges, and which will bring me to Zug, to Oim on your marks, the new privately run training facility powered by Hans-Peter Strebel, which is one gigantic project, and I'll be really looking forward to helping there, and hopefully making a great success, and then helping Swiss sports with this one. Yeah.
So what sports will you guys be working on specifically at that new training center?
Well, I mean, originally the idea came from a HP. He's the chairman of the EV Zug, so the hockey team in Zug. So the entire the performance teams of the hockey club, they all be using OIM's facilities for athletic training, nutrition, and research and development. So hockey will still be quite a big part of the new project. And also with the Swiss Ice Hockey Federations, they're already in contact with OIM, and there's going to be collaborations between my new place and the federation, probably, because I mean the opportunities and the possibilities are just crazy. I mean, you have everything from training, nutrition, housing, accommodation, all the way to, I mean, there's an ice rink, like a international level, or even like an NHL size ice hockey ring in the basement of it. So you can do, your on ice training, you can do therapy, you can do training, you can sleep there, you can eat there. I mean, it's crazy. So primarily, I mean, ice hockey will be a big part, but I know there's also a project with the women's handball national team. So they're trying to pretty much raise up a new women's handball team, starting with, I think, 16, 17-year-old girls, where they can go to school and study and, have integrated training and nutrition and all of that. So that'll be a big part. And apart from that, I mean, it's open to all team sports and individual sports. And I think we'll figure out who's gonna be crazy enough to join us with our new adventure. I mean, the possibilities are there for pretty much every sport. So yeah, but hockey and handball will be a big ones at the beginning, I guess.
Does that remind you of some of the things you saw during your internships when you were in the US with Altis, for example, in terms of the facilities and the way they run their sports, which is very professional in a sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely from, it's still in the private sector on your marks. And I've never seen such a privately run facility with, that size and that opportunities. It's more, I like comparing to what I've seen, it's probably comparable to, the University of Minnesota with their budget and facilities and so on and so forth. I mean, they have those kind of opportunities, but privately run, I mean, Macklingen is kind of similar, but I think we have never seen such a facility and opportunities. I mean, it's crazy. We're so fortunate to have such a place in Switzerland opening up. And that's also a reason what, made me so excited about this new job opportunity. I mean, it's pretty much sports performance heaven. I mean, you have everything you ever wanted in one place. So
yeah, it's usually you get them, but you have to travel a little bit left and right to reach them. So you're talking about this, this kind of next generation type of training facility here in Switzerland. Since you've been to the US a few times and you've been able to work there and to intern there, can you talk about some of the cultural differences that you see between Switzerland as a whole in terms of sports and then the way they see sports there in the US?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, a big difference. Strength and conditioning has been around in the US and has a really strong culture in general. I mean, they've, or compared to Switzerland is really, really new to the field. I think, in the private sector, there's many more people, picking it up, and new gyms are opening, but it's still a very young field. And I mean, I'm not saying there hasn't been, coaches around doing it, but maybe it hasn't been coined strength and conditioning. I mean, if you think of track and field coaches, is all like strength and conditioning has always been a big part of what they've done. Where in the US, that field is quite old, 30, 40 years old, and has really developed out of, from my sense, a lot of it comes from, bodybuilding and powerlifting, and has still, a bit of that, it's still a bit that bias towards it. I think in the US is still, I mean, it depends on what who you talk to and what kind of resources you look at, but I think it's still very much based on strength and strength-based sports. So still strong bias towards powerlifting and bodybuilding. Maybe a little less bodybuilding, but I think the powerlifting influence is still quite strong in some schools of thought. Whereas here in Switzerland, I think maybe not as much for the coaches, but I think especially for the athletes, if they think of strength training or weight training in general, the first thing they think of, it's always, bodybuilding, it's building muscle. That's the only reason why we go to the gym, it's to build muscle. So we have, that fitness industry, that bodybuilding type of bias, especially from the athletes. And I think it takes a lot of effort and education to educate them that, good performance training is more than just, strength training and, building muscle. And there's way many more nuances and components towards it. And I think differences between the US and here, I think tradition and quantity is a big one. And I still think like we tend to, I think the new generation here is very much oriented towards, the US kind of educational resource. I think Exos is still, I think Exos does a really good job, but I think it shouldn't be, the holy grail of, performance training. I think an Exos is just, they do a lot of, very good marketing. And I think a lot of Swiss coaches are oriented towards, the US resources, and Exos has a quite strong influence in our field. And I think there's many good things, or many good coaches out there coming from Europe, or also overseas, Australia. I mean, Australia is especially in the sports science area, is very far advanced. And I think maybe broadening a bit the horizon and opening up to other resources might be a good, a good way forward. I think we shouldn't be just, being too much focused on, what's going on in North America, because I think there's still a quite strong bias in the US,
So what for you, having, again, been in the US and seen all of that, what is maybe missing from the general, I'm not saying from everywhere, obviously, because some people are doing all the good things, all the important things right, but what are some of the things missing from the general cultural perspective of strength and conditioning?
You think in the US?
Yeah, US.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's very much, strength is still, the most important thing, most important aspect. And just getting people, weight room strong is the main goal. So you still focus on, bilateral, traditional powerlifting exercise, squat, deadlift, bench press are still very much prominent. And I think, if we talk, that's also a reason why, I consider myself a sports performance coach rather than a strength conditioning. I think for me, it's more of really, trying to improve, the athlete's performance on the field. And I think there's many different components coming from, skills acquisition, and also, transfer to the sport. And I think, yes, the weight room is an important factor and an important area of performance training, but it can't be the only one. And I think, talking about, sprinting technique, plyometric training and just all integrating that and trying to get that transfer to training and ultimately also keeping the athlete healthy, I mean, what good does it do if you have the most explosive and or strongest athletes if they're always injured and on the sidelines? I mean, that doesn't help anything. And I think I think there is still quite a few people just chasing numbers in the weight room and feeling like they're doing their job. And I think it's just way more than that, and I'm trying to maybe have be more of a generalist rather than just a strength guy.
Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in how that would be structured for example, for your hockey athletes. How much of a component is strength in their physical preparation compared to all the other components? And can you talk a little bit about how you structure training around that?
It's an interesting question, Sean. Well, it's a question I haven't really an answer for myself. I've been asking myself that question this year and like in the past year. Well, traditionally, the last couple of years, strength has still been quite a strong component. So we've still been lifting quite a few. I mean, hockey off season, it's usually like you have 8 to 12 weeks where the guys usually don't, even perform the sport. I mean, hockey off season is very special and very different from maybe other sports because they don't go on the ice, So you either in the weight room or maybe out on the field, on the pitch, doing some work. But I mean, as the name itself says, like it's off ice training, and I mean the sport is played on ice. So everything we do is, quite general. So I wouldn't go that far as saying like anything we're doing strength conditioning wise for the hockey guys is very specific. Unless maybe go inline skating or do some, there's things which might be a bit more specific, but it's never that specific as for maybe field-based sports such as soccer or rugby or American football or things like where you can perform drills or create prerequisites you actually need for skill acquisition where the ones you need on the field during the sport. And so everything we do is quite general. And I think I mean force and generating force is still the underlying quality for movement and for power expression. So I think it's still important to get people strong, but it's really important to also trying to get that transfer for in and move away from just high force, slow velocities, and also incorporate higher velocity movements and strength training. And I've been tinkering out with slower, like I mean it's coming from Cal Dietz triphasic training, where you start off with a high force low velocity phase, and then we go into power and peaking phase where it shifts from high force to a high velocity kind of thing, and just adapt that to your strength type movements. But I mean, this year I think still strength is important, but I come away from that idea of concentric based strength is that important. I think where I'm at now, I think isometric and especially eccentric strength is very, very critical, and especially eccentric strength at higher velocities is really crucial also for concentric power development and power expression. So I think this year will be more, I mean, you got to have a base, of course. I mean, you need to have, the structural tolerance, integrity to be able to, to tolerate the loads you put yourself through if you do, high velocity eccentric training. But I think for, a good transfer training or a good transfer to the field, I think high speed eccentric strength is really, really crucial. And I think I'm gonna be focusing a bit more on this during this year. Also, the guys I've been working at privately, I've had those guys. This is my third year working with them. So we've kind of, built that trust, that relationship first of all, which is absolutely crucial for, an athlete coach, relationship.
Mm.
And we've built this space during the last 2 years, which we can really, build upon this year. So I think strength in general will be less important. I think just overall health and in integrity will be really important. And then for when it comes to strength, more eccentric, isometric strength work will be more prominent. But I haven't got the perfect answer to your question.
Yeah, it's a forever evolving model from season to season, with everything that we learn, we try to include, and then take away what didn't work, and continuously move forward like that. Coming back on your education a little bit, you said that you hated the year that you did in Zurich. You told me off air earlier that it was a lot of theory. So what have you found works best for you in terms of learning environments? Is it still classroom theory that you can then apply, or do you really prefer just being on the field with a coach and then just seeing how things work?
Well, I hated it back then. I came straight out of high school and I just got thrown into the university setting. I was overwhelmed with, also, the theory in terms of micro. Everything was, based on, biochemistry and physics, and it was so far away from the human being from my sense of understanding. But I think having a well-based understanding of physiology and anatomy, also with physics, biomechanics especially, and a bit of biochemistry is super, super helpful and absolutely crucial to just understand how the human body and the movement works. And so I'm really, really glad I did that year. Ultimately, I just hated it at the time. And when it comes to learning now, I think it's got to be a combination of both. I think we work in a practical setting. That's where the sport is played, and that's where the people got to perform. So that's ultimately what counts. But I think it's got to be based on some kind of evidence. But that evidence doesn't have to come necessarily from just studies, because studies are always done on certain populations, and you find contradicting studies pretty much all topics. So I think you got to be careful of just focusing or basing your opinion on maybe just a single study. So we look at the quality of studies and maybe more focus on meta-analysis, where there's more more substance compiled together. But I think especially experiences of experienced coaches are super valuable, and it also should be part of evidence-based training or opinions. And I think just because they've worked in the field, they've worked in that practical setting for years and ages, and have had their failures and successes, and they it's always a trial and error experience a bit, and they've gone through this. And I think we got to learn from our history. And having good mentors is super, super helpful. I think it's got to be a combination of still doing the theoretical work with reading and going through studies and stuff, but it's you got to apply it in a practical setting, because that's where it counts. And for yourself, theory and practice is so far apart. So I think having good mentors and just gaining coaching experience, being thrown in different situations, working with teams, with athletes, with different logistics as well. At some point you maybe only have you can only do body weight work, and in other ways you can only do some work in the gym. That's invaluable experience to make as a coach, and that's where you probably learn the most. So mentors and experience, and yeah, that's why I feel like you'll never outlearn. You never done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to stay critical what you read, but also really critical with yourself, because I think the Dunning-Kruger effect is really it's very real, with all humans in general, especially men, and with coaches as well.
For those who don't know what it is, can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Dunning-Kruger effect is, maybe you can include it, I know in side notes, a little diagram, but you start off pretty much with knowing nothing because you haven't learned anything. So you start at the bottom here, and then you learn something. You go to school, you do your study, so you gain like some experience. Then you feel like, okay, fuck, I know everything. I got everything done. I know everything. I'm here and I'm at the top of the world. And then the deeper you go, the more experience, the more knowledge you actually gain, the less you actually believe Then it just comes down. You feel like, okay, fuck, and I think it's called like the valley of despair, where you're just at the bottom. I mean, you have experience, you have knowledge, but you feel like, fuck, I don't really know anything. Maybe I guess, maybe I think, but what do I actually know? And I'm around this area here. Like, I feel like, okay, I have an idea. I think, and I have pretty good guesses, but actually knowing, fuck, man, the human body and like sports, so we don't know shit. We don't know anything for sure. It's a guess. It's an informed guess at most. So, and having this kind of mindset is really crucial, I think, for our field, and just, well, pretty much any field in general. And we just get caught up with our egos, feeling like we're entitled. We've gone through the process. We've dedicated time, and now it's just time to get the rewards, and it's not like it.
Yeah, we were talking about this with Pat Davidson yesterday, how we're married to what we learn and what we invest in, and then if we realize down the road that what we learned or what we read, what we invested in, whether it's time, money, emotions, if it's not true, we need to be able to let go of it in order to move on and actually paint a more accurate model of reality, so that we can help our athletes win games, because that's really what's at the bottom of it all.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's really difficult to let go of your opinions. I mean, your opinions is part of your identity, and nobody really likes to question their own identity. Our experience shape our opinions, and I mean, the resources you read, the schools of thought you go through. I mean, that all shapes your opinion and your identity ultimately, and questioning that is, fuck, man, it's hard. It's really hard. And I mean, I've been guilty of this for sure. I mean, I started off, really learning a lot from the guys at Elite Training. They've been following Joe DeFranco. They've been following Mike Rodango, Altis, and they know that's my schools of thought. And it can't be everything, but I just fall into the trap of thinking like, this is gospel. This is the one thing that's true. And it's never like this,
If you had any advice for up and coming coaches that want to try and, be the best that they can be, and with that, like you said, comes the part of leaving your ego aside and being okay to, let go of some ideas that you might have thought were the truth for a while, but turn out not to be. Like, having gone through that, what would be your advice to young coaches that haven't had to go through that yet, but that they'll have to face it one day or the other if they want to move forward?
Just shut up and listen. I think shut up and listen is a good advice. As a beginning, I think you got to I think we all have to go through this, and we all go through this period of where you feel like, okay, I know everything. I think it's just very important to stay critical and just stay humble. And I think what also helps is, going through, a very a humbling experience of, well, a work experience, or just generating your first experience as a coach. And I think that's something which is just, regular in our field, especially in the US. I mean, if you look at, what people go through in the US, I mean, you start out usually as an unpaid intern. So you don't get shit. You don't get any money. You don't get any rewards. You might be able to, train at the gym for free. And then you go through your studies and you maybe become, a graduate assistant, or you become, an assistant, unpaid for sure, for 2-3 years. And then you maybe become a GA, a graduate assistant, still unpaid. You work your ass off. You work 6 days a week. You go, you start working 5:30 and you finish up at 6. And that's just normal in the US. And I mean, I'm not saying we should aim to develop a system like this, but if you eat shit like this for some times, and you got a hussy work at 20-hour fitness at night to earn your rent and so on. I mean, it just puts you in your place a little bit. And I think here in Swiss, I mean, that's nothing we should aspire to. I mean, I hated being an unpaid intern, of course, because it's so unusual here. But I think it's because at first, I mean, what do you actually bring to your employer? I mean, pretty much nothing. You help putting, setting up training, and you maybe you're a good spotter, and you help clean up the gym and shit, but you're not actually.
It's like being an apprentice in a manual job, right? Your first day on the job site, you've never done anything. You're pretty much useless. You're wasting more time to the boss because he has to explain everything and how it works, pretty much, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly how it is. And I think there's too many people out there feeling entitled. Okay, I've studied this. I went to school, so I know what I'm doing. Yeah, maybe you have an idea, but it's still pretty useless to your employer at first. So I think shut up and listen, then just having to go through, this eating shit period. I mean, it doesn't have to last 3 years or whatever, but I think it's good maybe doing it for a couple of months and then, working your way up. I think that actually helps. And just mindset. And I think that comes from learning from mentors. I think you have a good mentor, that's one of the first things they teach you. So those would probably be the best advice I could give to young coaches.
In the, let's say, sports preparation, sports performance field, how do you effectively communicate with the sports coaches and the other staff members so that you guys are all pulling in the same direction in regards of the athletes and the team? Because I find that a lot of times it can feel disjointed, where you feel like you're trying to do your best, but you're doing your best on your own and you're not really communicating enough with the other coaches. So what have you found to work in the last few years?
It's a very interesting question. It's a very important question too, because I think it's got to come down to everybody pulling in the same direction, especially in a team setting where you work with a team, where you're employed by a team. And I think it comes really down to trust in each other. And the one relationship I can really speak of highly is the relationship or the situation I have with the national team coaches and the staff in general. And it comes down to trust and appreciation of each and everyone's position and field of expertise. I think the coaches, first and foremost, they have to appreciate the field of strength conditioning or athletic training or performance training. If they're not bought into the idea of this actually helps our team, our players perform better and win more games, I mean, they won't care. They won't care. So I think it has to do with education and maybe like talking to them a lot about maybe some things. And I think it's really necessary to dumb things down, to break it down, to know what's most necessary and what's understandable to them. Because coaches are, I mean, they're usually not scientists, and a lot of sports performance coaches or strength and conditioning coaches, they come with a science background, and I think it's really critical to speak the same language. And I think that's where a lot of S&C coaches lose their sport coach, where they speak too technical or with a scientific language which just coaches don't understand. So I think,
well, is it I'm going to just push back for a minute against what you're saying here. Is it our jobs as sports performance coaches to dumb things down, or is it the sports coach's job to level up and actually understand the biodynamics, bioenergetics, and biomotor qualities that make up their sport to be better coaches, and in turn understand what we're talking about?
That's a dangerous question to answer. No, I think ultimately, I mean, sports coaches would definitely benefit from having a bit more like a scientific lens, or more like an S&C lens. I mean, understanding the human body and training sciences, would definitely help them. Absolutely, no questions asked, 100%. But I mean, where we at now, it's just the sports coaches, are the bosses. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones with the responsibility. And from where we at now, it's still our part of making maybe 2 steps in their direction, and if you're lucky, maybe the sports coach takes 1 step in your direction. And I think it would be absolutely great if they come more into our direction, but I think that's just not realistic at where we are now. So I think maybe it shouldn't be our duty, but I think it is to run a successful program. And I think that's where a director of performance will come into play very handy. And someone that hierarchically above the sport coaches and actually takes care of all physical loading, whether it's sports practices and S&C trainings or gym work and etc. So someone that's actually in charge of that would be great in my opinion, but that's just not where we are right now. And so I think communication with coaches is key, and then just building that appreciation of our field is key, and then just having a trustworthy relationship. And it's really hard. I mean, it comes down to interpersonal skills. And I think that's a reason why it works really, really well in the national team, is that it's a very harmonic coaching staff, and we all honor and appreciate each other, and really, really got out each other's back, and have a lot of respect for the work we all do. But I mean, I can't give you a secret formula for that. I think it's really helpful being honest and being authentic, and just to build trust and a good relationship. And I think that's got to be the base. Because if the sport coach doesn't trust you, or if you don't trust the sport coach, that's a recipe for failure and disaster. So in any relationship, of course.
In the continuation of what I was asking before about the education of whose job is it, maybe the middle piece is, at this stage in the development of, let's say, the structure of sport performance, which usually does not include like you mentioned, a program manager, a global load management, let's say chef. Maybe it's our jobs as performance, or let's say physical preparation for sports. Maybe it's our job to educate our sports coaches, put on mini presentations for them so that they understand our perspective. And in that sense, not tell them, it's your job to go seek out education, but maybe we need to take that, like you said, 2 steps forward, and maybe hope that there's 1 in return. But maybe we need to step up and say, okay, well, if they don't understand the demands of the game, I need to explain that to them, because it's kind of fundamental for a sports coach to understand that rugby is not a 30-30 kind of sport. And so, just running 30-30s all day does not match the demands of the sport. So what do you think of that as us, doing that work and trying to essentially educate the sports coaches?
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that 100%. I think, coaches education is key in that area. I think we got to do, and, break things down so they can understand, the critical aspects of it. I think that's, absolutely key. It's a question that's been around now in the S&C community, and I wonder if, the current sports coaches are willing to go that far. I think where it maybe will lead a bit more will be that, S&C coaches, they actually start learning more about the game and about, technical and tactical aspects of the game. I think that's, in any scenario, I think that's also critical for us to understand, to have, a better understanding of the game we're coaching at. So having, maybe like a foundational base of tactical and technical understanding is very critical. And I think it could go that far that we'll see, people with an S&C background, taking up more and more sports coaches positions in the future. I think, maybe the mindset of, people working in S&C or in sports performance is more likely to go that way than, the other way around. I don't know. It's speculations, but I think yes, absolutely. For your question, it's absolutely critical to trying to educate your coaches. I think it needs to be done in a language, in a matter they'll understand. For that matter, I also work with Swiss Uni UK. I'm the athletic coach for under 20 for the under 23 men's national team. And during the Corona time, we've started doing weekly webinars, educating players about, their body and strength and conditioning training and training in general. And we've had coaches joining in and staff members as well. And I think that's one step, in the right direction. And I really hope that pays off in the end. But we'll see how much, we actually stick with them. I'm interested. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's kind of a moving target with this whole Corona situation. When sports is probably the last thing that they'll allow to pick up again after the stores are reopened and the schools reopen and the unis reopen. Sports is definitely deemed non-essential in that regard. So we'll be the last on the list. And, I'd be surprised if we can do anything still this season with rugby anyway. We might just have to, wait it off and start off in August. We talked, back and forth here about sports coaches learning more about strength and conditioning, or at least the physical foundations of their sport. But on the other side as well, performance coaches learning about the sport itself, because it's true when you push your preparation to its logical conclusion, and we're going towards more and more specificity in the sport to prepare the athletes for the sport itself. We need to understand, again, the demands of the sport, the drills, the tactical scheme, the technical components, so that we can integrate it. So can you talk a little bit about that? Essentially that arbitrary divide that we mentioned briefly off air between physical preparation, technical, tactical coaching, all the therapy rehab side as well. Because really it should be all one thing, but we've just drawn lines around certain boxes to make it easier for us to understand.
I'm not quite sure if I understand the question.
Yeah, let me reformulate. So you're a sports performance coach, and there's say technical, tactical coaches like sports coaches, and then there's therapists. But in reality, all of those are aimed to the same thing, and the lines get blurry depending on how far you go. Like I said, my physical preparation exercises might very much start to look like rugby at some point, because they're going to have to. So talk about that arbitrary line in the sand between, the sports coaches and the physical preparation coaches and the therapists and all of that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, very hard lines. I think what it comes down to is us having to coin, certain titles. You're the sports coach, you're the assistant coach, you're the physiotherapist, you're the doctor, you're the strength and conditioning guy. And I mean, ultimately, we all want, keep players healthy and win games. And I think where we've come is with these, titles and job descriptions, we've become very attached to, I got to be the expert in that field, and that expertise, this is me, this is my identity, this is my job, and this is where it begins and this is where it ends, and everything, a part of it is not my duty. I do my job. If I do my job well, I keep my job, and we're all happy. And I think it's, we have, our resources, our time is limited. We can't be an expert in all fields. It's just not possible. But I think having, a very, good expertise in one area, but also being, a generalist in many other areas helps tremendously in life in general, but in coaching and in sports, first would be just understanding each other's language, big problem I've discovered is just, S&C coaches talking to, each other at first, and then also physiotherapists. I mean, there's just different terminology, and just how are you supposed to communicate if you don't understand each other? And then also, with sports coaches, I mean, if they talk about speed and we talk about, velocity and power and explosive power, and, those are just words they can't really operate with. They have no understanding what we mean of it. And it's, it's the job of everyone to at least, develop certain terminology to communicate well for that gray area, which is like the generalistic area where, a sports coach knows a bit of therapy and training, and the S&C coach knows a bit about, sports coaching and therapy. And at least just got to be some kind of overlap, I think. And I think that's really, really crucial and important. That's where we got to do a way better job. And I think just developing, different lenses for different aspects of how to make people or how to make athletes better will help us tremendously. And I've seen this, prime example was at Altis, where, therapy and training is all integrated, and you have trackside therapy or performance therapy, going on before training, during training, after training, and you have your therapists, watching, every movement of every practice. They're in the weight room, they observe everything, and you also have the coaches, observing the therapy trackside and then afterwards. So everybody, in the boat is involved in the entire process, maybe not to the same amount, but I mean, you have your therapists, observing practice as if they were coaches. And what I've observed here is, you have people, either just, not even watching practice, or if they're there, they're not very attentive. They may just be there and maybe just look at some things. But I think attention and mindfulness is very, very important, very helpful for our profession, because we're trying to identify the little cues to stimulate the athlete later on, either during training or therapy, to gain, the performance advantage and performance gain. I think all the little information you can gather, is helpful. So, but I mean, it comes down to, budget and personnel, and yeah, it's many different factors involved, of course. But I think having that mentality of, we need to be a bit more generalists rather than like solely specialists might be a good starting point.
Yeah, and you mentioned budgets and staffs, and I mean, in hockey and in other big sports in Switzerland, there is money, there is staff, but in smaller sports like, for example, rugby, which I evolve in, there's almost nothing. We talked a little bit about this before off air, but can you talk about your perspective on actually what is needed for an amateur athlete to progress in terms of physical preparation? Because we think we need all those advanced things and advanced training methods, and when in fact we can go very far with very simple training and very few means.
Absolutely. I think, well, especially, the level I've seen here in Switzerland, I mean, also overseas, I think we tend to overcomplicate training, and we feel like we need to jump to, advanced methods way too soon. I think the key element of training needs to be consistency. If you do, the simple things well over a long period of time, you're gonna improve. And I think people are very, either anxious or impatient, and they feel like, okay, I gotta make, I want to be more explosive, I need to be fast, and they see all those things on on TV or social media, and feel like, okay, this is the secret sauce, I need to be doing this, and this will have such a huge impact on my performance, I need to do this right away. And in my belief, I think if you do the basics really, really well, I mean, the basics are the basics because they've proven themselves over many, many times, and you have fads and new things and innovations who come, and some stay, but a lot of them come and go. And I think if you focus your training on the basics, and the basics are boring, or they seem to be very boring because you do the same thing over and over again.
What are the basics for you?
Well, I mean, it comes down to my philosophy, but I mean, the big thing, it's got to be health for athletes for sure. But if we're talking performance, I always, what is sport made of? It's sprinting. It might be moving, laterally and backwards, but it comes down to sprinting. It's jumping and it's throwing, and then you prepare. Those are the more specific things you can do. And then you build your structural integrity and maybe your force capacity through, loading system. And loading system is usually involves some kind of weight training, But whether this is with barbells or dumbbells or kettlebells or, body weight or whatever, I mean, it doesn't matter too much. I think we tend to overcomplicate and get attached to things. I'm the kettlebell guy. I do, kettlebells are way better than dumbbells. What the fuck? The body doesn't care. It's just helping the system. And I think if you stick to these, simple things, if you jump, if you run, if you throw, and you build up these capacities really, really well. And I mean, those also if you're talking about transfer to sport, I mean, those are the things which you do in strength and conditioning, which are already that close to the sports. If you do them well, if you teach them well, and if people, adapt certain movement skills, that's going to have huge transfer to the sport. And then if you build like a good, strength base with, basic movement patterns, squat, a hinge, a push, a pull, some kind of, rotational pattern, I mean, you're good to go. And then if you look at, I think for me, it's another important factor is looking at, muscle actions, and maybe moving away from just, concentric based strength training, and looking more into, as I said, more the eccentric and isometric actions of our muscles, and, integrating that into strength training. But I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy exercise. You focus more, on the eccentric aspect of a movement, or, go into, high eccentric into like an isometric hold. I mean, that is a huge stimulus, and you don't have to go fancy with bands and BOSUs and, all that bullshit. I mean, you can do great stuff. You're just using, gravity and jumps and going from bilateral to unilateral, and then just, sprinting. I mean, sprinting is, the forces that act on the human body during sprinting are like tremendous. I mean, that's crazy stimulus for a system. And if you do that well with, the intent and intensity which is meant to be trained at, I mean, it's hugely beneficial for force capabilities and just performance in general. And I think, those would be the basics for me. And if you do those well, you don't need a lot. I mean, to sprint, to jump, to throw, you need nothing but maybe some kind of met balls or some kind of throwing device, But to sprint, to jump, you need nothing. And to get strong, I mean, you can come, a very far way of just doing body weight work, and combining exercises wisely, and working with time and attention, using isometrics, and you're good to go. I mean, people are gonna get better, and I think actually, I mean, there's a point of diminishing returns for every training you do, but I think until you actually reach that point, most people jump ahead way too soon, and they could, milk that cow way longer. And I think you said it well off air last time. I mean, you rob the athletes twice if you jump to advanced methods too soon. Maybe you can recite. I can't remember what you actually said.
It's definitely not mine. It's from Kier One and Flight rugby strength coach. If I'm not mistaken, he says you rob them twice. You rob them of the adaptation they could get now from the basic training, because if they, like you said, milk the cow for as long as you can, because it's once you're done with that, let's say, linear progression as a beginner, then it gets more complicated, and you want to get there as late as possible. And like you said, milk the cow. So you rob them once there, and then you rob them of that potential adaptation from the advanced means of training that they would have once they would have had finished their basic linear progression as beginners. So yeah, rub them twice. Essentially, that's where it came from. I think it's an important concept, and I guess us as coaches, we have to refrain ourselves, because it's the stuff we care about. It's the stuff we read about. It's the cool training things. It's what the pros do, and we want to do it too. But like you said, we have to think of our athletes and what levels they're at. And if simple is good enough for them at that point, we need to respect that, and we need to just put our egos on the side and just do what's simple for them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, keep it simple and stupid. And also, taking that up, what you said, I think you're absolutely right. People want to do what the pros do. But from what, my experience, I mean, I've had some insights in, a couple NHL teams. I've worked with the highest level hockey guys here. I mean, I was with Altis, where, some of the best track and field athletes of the world train. And I mean, to be honest, all these guys, I mean, they don't do the fancy stuff. At Altis, Dan Path, he does a step up, he does, a hinge. They do jumps, they sprint, of course, because it's their sport. And they jump, they run, they throw, and they do simple lifts. And that's it. They don't do any of this fancy stuff. And same with the hockey guy, with the NHL guys. I mean, they don't. I mean, of course, the NHL is a special situation because they play so many games, and they usually don't get the players during the off season. But in season, they do very minimal training, and they try to load the players. Is in a sense that makes sense to maintain the adaptations, or to make slight progresses. And they don't do the fancy stuff. The fancy stuff you see on Instagram, I have no idea. It's not the people you look up to who even do these things on a regular basis. I don't know. It's just those are the things that sell well or get more likes on on social media. But even these guys, that might be like 5% of their training, and the rest, they do the simple things.
Right.
And I like, Stu McMillan from Office, he has a mentality of, the rule of 70-20, and 10. So from, the 100% of training, 70% of the things he does, he thinks he knows it helps. He thinks. And those are usually the basics. They jump, they run, they throw, they lift. And then the 20%, it's the things he guesses works. It might be some new research. Maybe he's done some reading, but he's done, his research. So it kind of makes sense, but he doesn't really know yet, but he guesses it works. So there you could, include some, some more advanced stuff, some new things, and so on. You can experiment a bit more, but still very, very informed. It's an informed guess. And 10% of his training, from the 100%, only 10% is where I think he puts it, where he believes it works or something. I don't know, maybe I recited it wrong, but those are the 10% where, there's a new study or something, that just came up, which kind of makes sense. He wants to try out, but look, that's the experimentation. And coaching has always been and always will be, a process of experimentation. You trial and error, and then you keep what works and you drop what doesn't work. But he only experiments 10% with, new things each year and each season. And I think that's a very good approach for, up and coming coaches. Maybe you go with, maybe less there, but just having, I think it's we fall into the trap of just, throwing everything away and just going with the new things we read or listen to a podcast. It's like, oh, this is, the next best thing. And you just get rid of all of things that has been around for ages. So keeping in that 70 to 80 to 90% of, consistent work of the basics. And then it's gotta be a fluid process. And I don't say training has to remain boring forever and you can't experiment, take up new things. I mean, I'm not saying we don't, well, as I said, we don't know shit. So it doesn't mean the basics are the best, but just they've proven themselves for a long, long time. So it might be dangerous I just feel more comfortable doing them rather than, doing everything new. So I think that 70, 20, 10 rule is really a good starting point.
Yeah, I like it. It's definitely a good way to kind of frame it so that you get you get the stuff that works, but you also have a little bit of room to try new things and who knows, maybe it works, maybe not, and you just switch it out and it's 10% anyway. So it's not a big deal. Slowly wrapping up here, Sam. Do you have a couple maybe books to recommend to the listeners and the viewers that are interested in that field of sport performance? Maybe some of the books that have influenced you and your thinking over the years.
Yes, absolutely. I'm still a big fan of triphasic training from Cal Dietz. The book has been out for quite some time now, and he adapted his ideas quite a bit. It's a very high stress model, so you got to be careful when applying it to your athletes. But I think just the key messages of it are very, very valuable. So I really, really still enjoy it. I think James Smith's applied sprint manual is a very good starting point for sprinting mechanics and just speed and power training for, track and field, but also, team sport athletes. So I think that's very valuable. I like Ian Jeffrey's Game Speed, which is, transferring your speed training to actual game speed for team sport athletes.
Yeah.
And what I can highly recommend is just it's not a book, but it's just all coaches' educational material that comes from Altis. They have, different courses for track and field events, but they also have like a longer course, which is called the foundation course. And they did a second one, which is called the preferred performance therapy program, the PTP. Mm-hmm. And they're a bit more expensive, but they're invaluable. It's so good. I think that should be really on every coach's list. And yeah, So those would be the big one. I like Charlie Francis. I like his stuff as well, Speed Trap and Charlie Francis training systems. I think that's a good starting point for coaches as well. Also moving away from the weight room a bit. I think there's tons of resources, coming out of the powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting area. You have starting strength and the 5-3-1, strength manual from Jim Wendra. I mean, from that area, there's tons of resources. Also, with Westside Barbell and all that. But I think, for me, it's more of coming away from that area and moving more into, that holistic approach. And that's just, you got to learn, biomechanics and, sprint mechanics and jumping mechanics and throwing and just understanding human movement, and less being stuck with, sets and rep schemes for your big lifts. I think that's just not where the money is. Well, yeah, that's not where the true value of our profession lies. So
well, I definitely agree with you on that. And lately I've been shifting more and more towards, like you said, understanding the simply movement in general and how athletes move on the pitch and how you break that down into its component parts and then train those component parts so that when you put it back together, you have, a faster, stronger, more powerful athlete. Sam, where can people find you on social media if they want to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter account. It's SB Elite Training. I'm not very active on Twitter, so I'd recommend if people want to reach out, they can reach out to me either via my homepage. It's sam-boehringer.ch. I have a contact form there, or on my Instagram, and it's currently coach_Sam_unique training. So
I'll link all of that in the show notes. Sam, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Sean.